Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sherie Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.
Hi, and welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm David.
And I'm Sherie.
And we have an awesome one today that I've been thinking a lot about recently. A lot about. And my clients will hear this and be like, yes, this does sound familiar. Which is great because there's so much good information out there. So much to talk about. And this one is something that I think everyone can relate. Everyone can relate.
Definitely some more than others, but...
Some more than others. But we want to talk about understanding and overcoming intrusive, unwanted thoughts.
Yes.
That's a big statement.
Yeah.
If you think I can overcome my intrusive, unwanted thoughts, sign me up, right?
Right.
And this can be addiction related. It can be triggers or temptations or cravings. It can also be anxiety or depression related.
Or OCD.
Yep. So it doesn't matter what the thought is telling you or what the message is, so much as just how do we deal with these thoughts that we don't want that sometimes feel like they're taking over.
Yes.
So to start, I thought some key takeaways is going to be really good. So I want to identify some key takeaways first that we can talk a little bit about, which are truths that we talk a lot about. So these may sound familiar, but we want to just reemphasize the importance of our relationship to our thoughts.
Yes.
And to start to frame this up. So if you were going to take notes, this would be a great episode, this and coming episodes, because there's a lot of really good information. And so pen and paper ready, or tablet or laptop or phone.
Repeat.
Yeah.
Rewind.
Just, this is recorded, so you can listen to it again, right?
Yep.
So one of the first key takeaways for overcoming these intrusive, unwanted thoughts is do not believe everything you think and do not take all of your thoughts seriously.
Yes.
This is a book that I love that I've recommended by Joseph Wynn called Don't Believe Everything You Think. And it's so good if you haven't heard of this book or if you think it might be helpful just by the title of it. It is amazing.
Yeah. There's so much that goes through our minds.
So much.
That isn't true, that is just a passing, fleeting something, that's a story we've told ourselves, that's an unwanted, intrusive thought, right? There's so many things that just kind of come and go through our minds that is not, it's definitely important to make sure you're not believing and taking seriously everything that's kind of floating around in your mind, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the internet a little bit.
Yeah. Definitely.
There's definitely good stuff in there, but you definitely shouldn't be like, oh, I read that on the internet, so it's 100% true or 100% should be taken seriously and considered seriously.
Right. And I think everybody can relate to these where, let's say you're holding a kitten and you think, how easy would it be to snap this kitten's neck?
Right.
And it doesn't mean anything. You may feel bad you had the thought because we then take it and say, oh, what does this say about me? This does not line up with my values at all.
Yes.
Why would I think this thought? And we can actually make it a much bigger thing. But when we accept and realize that we just have lots of random thoughts.
Yeah.
You may be walking by a ledge and think, what if I jumped off this ledge?
Right.
It doesn't have to mean anything that you had this thought. Or you're shopping in the supermarket and you think about sex. It doesn't have to mean
Yes.
what you might make it mean. And so
Yes.
just to begin with, here's the concept. We have anywhere from 60 to 90-ish thousand thoughts a day. You don't have to take these thoughts seriously. We have lots of them and they don't have to have an explanation. Especially if we think in terms of higher power, and our higher power has the ability to put thoughts into our head or give us thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, so does let's say
Like
the
the
adversary.
adversary. Mm-hmm.
He can put thoughts in our head too. And I'm sure few things are as rewarding as him putting the thought in our head and then seeing us
Yes, watching us
deal with
really own it and believe that this came from us and has massive implications for our
Right.
mental health and
Oh
value
boy.
system and all of that, right?
Yep.
Yes, for sure.
Definitely happens a lot. I think it happens a lot. So don't believe everything you think. Don't take all your thoughts seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And we could call it recovery from unwanted thoughts starts when you change how you see them.
Yes.
And in fact, I have the affirmations that you're all familiar with if you listen to these episodes. And the fourth affirmation is I can manage my emotions in healthy ways. Well, I've recently reworded that to be, now think about the wording here. I can relate to my thoughts and feelings in healthy ways.
Yes.
Because really, this is what we're talking about, is relating differently with the thoughts and the feelings that you have.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
controlling, which is another really important concept here that we want to talk about. This idea that we're not trying to even avoid the thoughts. We're not trying to fight the thoughts. We are accepting them completely. Because if you avoid it or fight it, guess what happens?
Stop thinking about the elephant in the room.
Don't think about it. Don't think about it.
Yes.
Your brain will say, I need to pay attention to this thing that you're thinking about a lot, only because it seems like something to pay attention to, not because there's actually something there to pay attention to. And so we want to be careful of what we're telling our brain are important thoughts or feelings to pay attention to. It's kind of a unique concept, but it works. So whatever we resist persists. And we want to reach a point where, kind of maybe a good analogy is like junk mail. It comes into your inbox and you don't open it and you don't read it. You just send it right to the spam folder. And yeah, more will come, right? But we do the same thing when more comes. And pretty soon, hopefully, your brain will automate the process.
Yes. Yeah.
And we get better at saying, this thought doesn't relate to me. And even if I related in times past through behavior to this temptation or trigger or whatever, I can learn how to change the way I relate to these same thoughts and feelings.
Yes.
And then your brain will say, oh, okay, change. Let's adjust. I don't have to pay as much attention to these thoughts and feelings anymore. Easier said than done, I know, but important concepts.
Yes. I love that so much because I think, again, that goes right to that space of meaning, right? Like what meaning are you giving it?
Right.
And are you giving it the meaning that it matters or that it's just junk mail that goes into your spam folder?
Yep.
Right? Like, oh, that's weird. Oh, it'd be so easy to snap that kitten's neck. That's weird. Like, that doesn't apply to
Anyway,
me. Huh.
yeah, anyway.
Yeah. And so instead of giving it time and attention and all of that so that the brain, again, begins to put so much more emphasis on it. Whoa, we need to pay attention to it.
Right.
You just sort of discard as like irrelevant to you. And then the brain's like, oh yeah, not relevant. Let's not spend time on that.
So very important concept. Again, the brain latches onto thoughts that are met with alarm and concern. But the brain can also learn to let go of these attachments, we can call them, with repeated effort and some exposure work, which we will talk more about how exposure therapy works.
Yes.
But for those of you maybe familiar with Buddhist meditations or Buddhism, this sounds familiar. The process of learning to let go of attachments is a really important principle and one that I love, actually. Just the idea of letting go of attachments feels freeing. And you can reach a point where you see these thoughts or feelings as attachments that we can work through and let go.
So as you're being aware of things and what's going on in your brain and you're just accepting like, oh, yep, there's something there, but you don't engage with it, then your brain responses start to shift. Your brain will get rewired. Those thoughts will start to reduce, get tapered out.
Yep.
starved a little bit.
Right.
It'll start to starve that
That's
process.
the concept.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You want to just prune those neural pathways.
Yep. Yep. And if we don't feed it or nourish it, it won't grow. And so one of the first steps is just accepting you have lots of thoughts and they don't have to identify your true character. Our actions reveal our true character a lot more than our thoughts, because we have so many thoughts and they can be so random, like what we're talking about. So
Yep.
So instead of trying to eliminate the thoughts, resist the thoughts, fight the thoughts, let's change how we relate to them. This is the acceptance rather than resistance or avoidance. What do these thoughts mean and what do they not mean?
Yes. Yep. And we've got to have that foundation moving forward. And everybody has those intrusive thoughts, right? Everybody's got them. We've talked about that. There's so many that go through our brains and they just don't have to mean anything.
Right.
And you can just, oh, yep, that was weird. And moving on. And so you can, as your brain is going through making connections around things and trying to figure things out, it makes all kinds of random associations, comes up with something bizarre or random things that don't represent anything about your values.
Right. And even if they represent something about how you used to behave, that's okay if you're in a change process. So you might say, well, yeah, okay, maybe I've struggled with porn and masturbation. Well, these thoughts are going to have more power, the emotions will have more weight because it has been reinforced. But that doesn't mean you're going to relate the same way now that you have in the past with these thoughts and feelings.
Or that you have to. Like, well, it's coming up. It has come up in the past. So therefore, that means that I'm really not as far along in my process as I thought, that I'm actually really stuck on this, that, you know, I'm not working as hard as maybe I thought I was, or I'm not as far in the process. I'm not doing a good job. It's just, that's irrelevant information. All of that is meaning making that you're making about these thoughts.
Right.
And so we just want to detach from the meaning that you're making and just accepting, oh, that's an interesting thing that just came up. I wasn't expecting that, right?
Right.
They're meaningless thoughts. They do not have anything to do with your moral values.
Right.
They don't have to have anything to do with your moral values.
Right. Yep.
Even if they maybe have in the past.
So here's the irony. By worrying about these thoughts or wrestling to fight them off, we're actually making them stick. And we can create a cycle of anxiety and self-doubt.
Yes.
So from this book, it talks about three internal...
And
this book is
Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts by Sally Winston and Martin Self.
Which, by the way, I would highly recommend. There's an app called Blinkist. It's Blink and IST.
Are we getting, some kickback from some of these?
Actually,
we're not. We're just throwing all these books out here. And
it's just a great app because it takes books and it condenses them into
I've got to start doing
20 minutes or so.
Yeah, I've got to start doing this.
I wish. Blinkist, if you're listening.
There you go.
But
everybody can get on this bandwagon.
Great app. Love it.
But the book is going to be great. And I think especially for people who may not be familiar with these concepts, you might really want to get in and read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right?
If you love the shortened version, certainly nobody keeps you from getting the longer one. But it's nice because all of these books are between 15 to 20 minutes. What does that say about
now,
me?
After our sponsor, we'll get back to our regularly scheduled program here. But anyway, so we've got that book and then the one that David mentioned earlier by
Joseph Wynn, Don't Believe Everything You Think. Yep.
So just make sure some of those are really going to be really good options as you're considering this. And again, I think if I was recommending books to clients, I would probably say get the actual book, listen to the whole thing, just because you're going to get a lot more detail and understanding and depth and connections.
Sure.
Right.
and read a lot less books probably too.
It's true. Yes, you can
I
do
mean,
it
this is
however you want.
This is with the author's permissions and everything. This is definitely not like some kind of pirated thing at all. Nope, nope. But definitely, I see it as a way of like, if you're interested in this, then dive in deeper. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So you've got a lot of really great options for you as you're considering this. But
Yeah.
with this book, the Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts, it talks about 3 internal voices. And the first one is the worried voice, the one that is desperately, constantly fretting over what ifs. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Right?
Yep.
We really associate that with anxiety.
Right.
Right? You're anxious. And if you're thinking about parts work, like we've talked about before, right, that would be an anxious protector part. Like, oh, I've got to figure out all the things that are happening, all the things that are potentially could happen, and prepare for those and think about them ahead of time so I'll be prepared if and when any of those things happen, and then I'll be safe, right?
Right.
So the what if worried voice.
Right. Which we're all familiar with on some level for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then that second voice is the false comfort. And that voice tries to soothe the worry, but it's only feeding the cycle because, remember, we just talked about that. The more that you're thinking about and going through, right, the more attention you're giving it, the more it's going to grow and have more power and more control. So
right,
you've got the worried voice, you've got the false comfort who's like, it's all going to be okay. It'll be fine.
Don't think about it.
Don't think about it. Just da 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 da. And then the third internal voice is the wise mind. So that's the calm presence that just observes everything, does not have judgment. This, if you remember parts work that we've talked about previously, would be related to yourself.
Right.
Right? That is the self that goes, okay, hang on, let's look at this. Let's just calmly observe, not judge, and just see what's going on here.
Right.
So the issue then is that your worried voice and the false comfort voice, they can go for forever.
Yeah, they really can.
They can just spiral out of control. We hear that a lot in therapy with clients that are struggling with anxiety, OCD. It's just this spiral. You get started on it and it will just go forever, right? And it's not productive. And the false comfort that's telling you not to think about it and then makes it harder, right?
Only makes it harder, yep.
Elephant in the room. And then because sometimes your intrusive thoughts are clashing with the values, you have this stronger urge to just, white knuckle it.
Really control it.
Make it not be there. And then you get exhausted, you get frustrated, and then that false comfort. And so it just keeps going and going and going, right?
Right. And whether it's like addiction related stuff like lust or it's anxiety related stuff like maybe fears, the analogy fits of trying to hold the beach ball underwater.
Yep.
You can only do it so long before you are tired, your willpower is low, and this thing shoots up.
Yes.
And so it kind of doesn't even matter what the thought is. It's the same process, and it's not going to be in resisting or avoiding or fighting that we relate to it differently.
Yes.
Which is it sounds really good because it's like, that sounds exhausting to fight this thing all day anyway. I'm exhausted, I'm worn out. I have these thoughts that keep coming back over and over and over.
But it's so fascinating that we don't really think, it's a little odd that we don't think about that. We're like, oh, no. This is what we've got to do.
Right.
We have to do this.
There's no other way but to fight it.
Yes. We've got to fight. And then we're exhausted because that willpower window is much smaller than we think it is.
It definitely is.
Right? Like, oh, I'm so strong. I can blah, blah, blah. You put your arm out and you stick a 10-pound weight on that. Like, how long is that actually?
Yeah, exactly.
You think it's
okay in the morning, maybe a little bit, but before too long, you're exhausted.
Yep.
So it's an awesome concept. It takes some practice. What we're trying to do is follow the wise mind, which encourages us to allow the thoughts to pass instead of giving them unnecessary attention. Mm-hmm. It's like we give them just enough attention to know what they are, and then we go, oh,
yeah,
it's fine.
And that goes back to that acknowledgement piece. Like you have to be an awareness that we talked about earlier. You do have to be aware, right?
Right.
Because that happens all the time, especially if this part of us, the worrier, is a pretty active part of your life. You'll notice that it's just sort of running in the background a lot on its own.
Right.
And you don't even realize all the ways and the spaces that you're worrying. So you do have to have that awareness and give it enough attention to be aware that it exists, right? Yep. And then let it pass like, well, okay, moving on.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Perfect. Yes. We'll come back. And
hope this is a good intro. We actually have a lot of information.
Yeah. Well, this will probably be a couple of episodes.
Yep.
But that's a good intro to it. And come back and we'll learn a little bit more about intrusive thoughts and how to start challenging them.
Thank you for joining us.
See you later. Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.